Hey there. I think I know why you're here. You're wondering if one of my Latter-day Struggles growth and processing groups is right for you. So let's talk about this for a few minutes. I'm going to just kind of imagine that you're one of my typical people who is thinking about one of my groups, and I'm going to go ahead and just anticipate what your questions are and do my very best to answer them. Okay, first of all, I want to just pretend like I know you at least a little bit. So if one or several of these things are you, then you're probably a good fit for one of my Latter-day Struggles groups. Okay, first of all, a lot of people that come to my groups were some of the most devout Mormons out there. I would imagine that in some way your Mormon identity is really deep inside of you. Also, you probably still have loved ones that are in the church. You're also probably feeling some degree of grief, of loss, of confusion, of anger, and maybe you're feeling kind of lonely because you don't have a lot of people to talk about this. Or if you do have people to talk to about this, it doesn't always feel very productive. I'm betting you want some guidance, but you don't want anybody to tell you what to do. You don't want somebody to tell you you must stay. You probably don't want somebody to tell you you must go. All right, something else that I would imagine about who you are, if this group is right for you, is you're probably craving community. You probably are looking for words to explain what is going on. And you also would like to have some language so that you know how to talk about this with more traditional loved ones. I'm betting that in some way you want to find some way to hold on to the part of you that is important to your identity that is Mormon in nature. You have loved ones and family that are still in the church, and you might be somebody that still wants to be involved in the church in some way, shape, or form. You might not be that person, but most everybody that I work with at least has loved ones that are devout Latter-day Saints. And in some ways, you probably want to find some peace, some resolution. You want to make sense of your story, of your life, and you want to gain some confidence in how to move forward. If this is you, then I think one of my Latter-day Struggles groups would be a wonderful fit for you. Okay, let's just talk a little bit about who these groups are not for. All right, so I'm guessing that, well, I'm not guessing, I can say from firsthand experience, if you are angry and want to come and vent every single week without necessarily desiring healing or solution, my groups are probably not for you. Also, if you're somebody who is super uncomfortable choosing how to direct your own life and you'd really prefer for somebody to tell you that you need to leave or that you need to stay, this group is probably not for you. One of the biggest things that I do is help people find the courage and confidence right inside of themselves to determine how you want your own spirituality to be unfolding in your life. This group is also probably not for you if you need everybody around you to think and feel and believe exactly how you do. One of the most important foundations of my healing groups is that everyone who shows up gets to be the spiritual being that they want to be, and this is not dictated or governed by any leader or any other person in the group, that we dignify the spiritual journey of each and every person. Okay, so that's who shouldn't be in this group. Next question that I'm anticipating is, you might be wondering how do my groups relate to other mental health options? This is a super good question because these groups are not therapy groups. What I like to call these is growth and processing groups or healing groups. I am a licensed professional counselor, but I don't really go deep into traumatic things. And so if you are someone that needs special attention with traumatic parts of your spiritual formation, I absolutely hope and welcome you to go to a mental health counselor, and a local one is probably the best, especially if you have a lot of unresolved trauma. Having said that, some of the most successful outcomes in the groups that I work with are people who are doing both. In other words, if you have a private mental health worker or a consultant or a coach, in some cases, kind of depending on what your situation is, and you also do one of my groups, it's kind of like hitting all of the things, meaning that we really do need community in this healing, because so much of our spiritual formation and our faith journey is around relationship. And so when we have a faith crisis, solving this and feeling like we're going through the steps that resolve it just doesn't go very well in isolation. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is if you feel like you need individual healing, especially around trauma, get yourself a mental health counselor. If you feel like that's not as much a thing for you, but you really want to make sense of and make meaning and find peace with, and really process your spiritual formation and your spiritual journey, then this is for you. I also will say I do some consultations, and a lot of the people that I do consultations with end up in my groups. And also sometimes my group members would like some individual attention and they sign up for consultations. So there's a little bit of a crossover with that. And so I guess I'm trying to just say there's a lot of options for you, and you feel out what you think is best for you. All right, next question is, what exactly do you cover in these groups? Now, of course, I can't go through in detail that big of a question, but I will give you just little bullet points, okay? I have 2 tracks of groups. They are both 1 year long. I'm going to start with my faith crisis healing track. That's where most people begin. What we talk about in there is I introduce you to your true self and to how we develop internally before we awaken to our true selves. I talk about meditation. I normalize the faith journey from the context of cycles of life. We also talk a lot about our own individual spiritual identity development, and we explore how every last one of us was passively formed spiritually. That's just normal. And then we also start talking about how we are taking that spiritual formation and we are individually choosing actively who we are becoming as spiritual beings. And we do that together in group. After that, we talk about how we are actively reclaiming our spirituality on our own terms, actually looking at teachings and practices of Mormonism and then making them our own. Or in some cases, we just opt out of certain things that don't feel resonant with our growing understanding of our true selves. We also do a lot of deep, deep work renegotiating or learning how to renegotiate relationships with more traditionally believing loved ones. This is a really big deal because almost everyone that comes to my groups has family members that are still traditionally believing, and we love and care about these relationships. And so it's a big deal to me that we really, really use what we're learning internally about ourselves and that we are able to take that growth into our relationships. Also, we learn about differentiation of self. And finally, I integrate transcending and including Mormonism throughout the whole arc of that first year of work. Okay, the second year, or I should say a second track of work, because you can start on either tracks, is my group called, well, it's my informal name is My Patriarchy Healing Groups. This is a year long also. We begin with a deep dive into the evolution of how the idea of the God-ordained family has dramatically changed. And we walk all the way from the life of Jesus to the 1980s when Ezra Taft Benson delivered his infamous To the Mothers in Zion and to the Fathers of Israel talks. Next, we learn about the language of patriarchy that was primary to so many of our spiritual identities. In other words, patriarchy was baked right into our identities, and so we learn about that so we can unlearn it and claim for ourselves who we are, not what our culture has taught us we need to be. In this group, we also go deeply into masculine and feminine energies, and we learn about how each and every one of us can become more integrated as human beings, strengthening our masculine and feminine energies, which reside in each of us. Then we go into how and why patriarchy emerged from the earliest points in human history. We talk about how God became a misogynist, how Jesus became a patriarchal pawn. Then we move into a conversation about how our brains grow in orders of consciousness, which help us better understand the healing from patriarchy process. And finally, these are fan favorites. We rewrite or we write a letter to Ezra Taft Benson, processing through how To the Mothers in Zion or To the Fathers of Israel impacted us from a place of empowerment instead of victimhood. And we end that year off rewriting several of the LDS Church's position statements using all of the love and knowledge that we have acquired in the year of our work healing from patriarchy. Fun stuff, right? Okay, next question is, I'm an introvert. Am I a good fit? The answer, oddly enough, is yes. And the reason why is because these groups are formatted so that those who are not introverts can participate and can share and really get involved. And inevitably, I always have people in my groups who are a little bit quieter, but they're absolutely taking a lot in and having a really, really good experience. I also will say that, well, and I have to confess, this may not be something you're going to believe, but it's true. I feel like I'm an introvert. I really do. And I have to say, for those of us like me who are introverts, we may not do so well in a big crowd, kind of like milling around and like small talking. But if you put me in a group of people that I feel deeply safe with, and you're interested in my soul, and I have time to understand you and know and be known and see and be seen, I open up. So this doesn't have to be your experience, but I'm here to say some of my introverts actually have a very transformative experience in this group because maybe for the first time they feel safe. So the short answer is yes, this is for you, even if you choose to just observe. The longer answer is yes, and you might even find something in you that emerges because you feel differently in this setting than you ever have before. All right, let's move to the next question. How are you and the Latter-day Struggles growth and processing groups different than other options online? Okay, there are quite a few options online, and I'm so happy about that, right? Because there was a time not very long ago where there weren't very many options. So I'm going to just say a few things that I think probably define what I do as at least slightly different. There are a lot of groups out there where people find connection, and I love that, and that is needed and necessary. We, of course, do that as well. I care tons about creating community. However, to my knowledge, I think I'm the only group that is structured, that is cohort based, meaning that you are with the same group of people or close to the same group of people for the whole year of your work. It's also curriculum based. I have spent thousands of hours creating a really, really beautiful curriculum for my faith expansion or my faith crisis healing and my patriarchy healing groups. I also will have you have access to video record or audio recordings, sorry, and also a textbook with kind of like a workbook component to it. So this is very structured. You can think about this like you would think about a graduate education in your spiritual development. I think that's different. Something else that I don't think is out there very much, if at all, is a lot of those spaces are not structured and led by a mental health professional. Also, I don't know that a lot of these groups have a goal in mind of helping people recover from the LDS oriented faith crisis with a solid understanding of their faith journey, of themselves, and of a spiritual path forward. I care a lot about this, and I've been very, very intentional about this, and I do think that's what sets the Latter-day Struggles groups apart. Okay, I offer every one of these things to you. And also, a couple more things I think I want to say about this in terms of how we're different here is that I know that out there, some groups are sort of set around an open format that in some ways may feel a little bit like venting or just sort of having somewhere to sort of process about some of the pain points. And I think there's a place for that. I also have heard many, many times people come to the Latter-day Struggles groups because they have been there, done that, and it served its purpose, and they noticed that they were kind of stuck. They were kind of just cycling around the venting, and they felt this longing for peace and for healing. And I've heard many times people say, I knew it was time to go to the Latter-day Struggles groups. So that's what we do here. We really want to help. I want to help provide a path for you towards spiritual healing. And actually, I know this is a big word, but I stand by it, spiritual awakening, because I think that's what happens here. And I've seen it happen over and over again. Something else that I want to make sure I'm clear about is we don't necessarily avoid addressing problematic issues in specific areas because those are there. And as you probably know, if you listen to the podcast, I don't shy away from those things. However, these spaces here in my groups are actually designed more to help you understand the version of you that wanted and needed early stage faith, which Mormonism is. And also, I help you make sense of and understand why you needed that, why every human being needs it, and also how you have come to where you are ready to move to a later stage of your growth and development as a spiritual being. And I walk you through that path. What we do in these groups is we come together and connect with this emerging, awakening version of ourselves that is ready for something richer and deeper and more connected to our internal divines. So what my group is, incidentally, is not exactly about the specifics of Mormonism, which always sort of comes to people as a surprise, but they're like, oh my goodness, these groups are more deep and more healing than I could have ever imagined. And I hear that over and over and over again. And you can only imagine how much that warms my heart because they are truly places of sacred communion between ourselves as we walk through these things together. All right, let's see what else. Okay, I think it's time to close. I feel like I've said plenty. All right. In conclusion, I want to share something with you that is very, very, it's kind of a story, an experience that is near and dear to my heart. Many years ago, many, many moons before the Latter-day Struggles platform, incidentally, I was in the Kansas City Temple as a very young mom, having, struggling, being a stay-at-home mom and feeling in some ways like I was not fulfilling the measure of my creation, to use a cheesy but really well, a way to describe how I was feeling. I was not feeling like I was fully satisfying who I was here to become. As much as I loved motherhood and whatnot, it wasn't right. Something was off. And I had a very strong impression that I was being prepared to do something really special that would reach thousands of people. And that I would have the chance to work closely with many, many people as we learned from one another and as we taught one another. And I couldn't fathom in a million years what that even meant. I went to grad school several years later and I thought to myself, well, maybe I will become a professor. I tried that and it didn't work. And I thought, I don't know what that even was. But I had this sense inside of my soul that I didn't need to worry too much about it, but just to do the next thing, and that my life will be guided to where it needed to go. And so I just tried my hardest to trust and to say yes to things that felt right to me, which is what led me to the Latter-day Struggles podcast and has led me here to you to be a facilitator of these groups. And I emphasize that I learn as much as I teach, right? Like this is as much about collaborating and healing in the context of other human beings. And so I am so excited for the chance to be in your life if this feels right to you. It's transformed so many lives, and I think amongst those that it's transformed the most, it's mine, but I'm willing to be wrong because I hope it's yours too. All right, if this feels good to you, jump back to the page and go ahead and just enroll. If there is not a group open right now at the moment that you're listening to this, there should be a form on that page expressing your interest for us to get in touch with you as soon as either the Faith Crisis Healing or the Patriarchy Healing group is in an enrollment period, and we will get in touch with you. And finally, if you have any more questions and I wasn't able to read your mind well enough, have no fear. We also have a provision for that. Reach out to admin@latterdaystruggles.com and you can schedule an appointment with a group graduate who can answer all of the questions for you. And that might even be better because that person will be able to give you their experience on the side of how they experienced it taking the group, because that is going to be maybe your experience. So follow your heart. If this feels good to you, jump in, and I would be so honored to be a part of your faith journey. All right, hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Latter-day Struggles. If this podcast has supported your faith journey, we invite you to explore the many ways you can continue your healing and growth with us. On our website, you'll find support and processing groups, marriage and parenting courses, and free resources to support where you are in your faith journey. You can also join Valerie in the live fellowship gatherings throughout the year, where we connect, process the podcast, and build meaningful friendships with others on similar paths. If cost has ever been a barrier, we offer podcast scholarships funded by listener donations. To explore all of these offerings, visit the link in today's show notes or go to latterdaystruggles.com. And if this podcast has been meaningful to you, leaving a 5-star review is one of the most powerful ways to help others find this work. Latter-day Struggles is proud to be part of the Dialogue Podcast Network.
Dialogue Podcast Network.